The Spin-Off Podcast Network. Skinny are helping you show how smart you are with the 1Q quiz, an all-new, super challenging and super quick daily quiz built by the Spin-Off. Every Monday, Skinny are giving you the chance to prove you're smart with the Skinny Extra Credit question. Get it right, and you'll get the chance to score yourself some Skinny Extra mobile credit, so you can text, call, or even video call your group chat and gloat about how big your brain is. T's and C's apply.
The Fold is brought to you by O-Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Kia ora and welcome to The Fold. This week I've got a guest I've been trying to get for quite some time. It's Melodie Robinson, who is just, I don't know, I think she's one of the most impressive people in New Zealand media, full stop. She is a former Black Fern, a former gallery journalist. She has an MBA from Auckland. She was the first woman to ever get near commentary of All Blacks games. She's so frequently in her career been the first woman, the first Māori woman in a role, and you know that the new, you know, as bad and unkind of reconstructed as parts of New Zealand still are. You know, when she first started doing this 25 years ago, the country was in a very different place. And, you know, she's flown the plane, she's put up with all kinds of stuff, which she touches on a bit. I mean, and honestly, like, I don't know how you show the character and the will to deal with, like, whole days of radio sport, the hostility of organizations that you work for. Some of the stuff that she's been through is probably unique in the annals of New Zealand media, and her response to that has not been to move away from it, but it has been to kind of try and build a structure so that there'll be more people like her, and part of that is the wonderful group, which we talk about on the podcast. She is now head of sport and events for TVNZ after a long career at Sky, but she's just and also honestly, like, the best, funniest, filthiest, craziest stories I've ever heard in my life have come from Melodie Robinson over a beer. She has seen some things, and just the very definition of wahine toa. It's a really, really fun podcast. I could have talked to her for another 2-3 hours, but I think we cover off a bunch of really interesting stuff. And yeah, enjoy. Kia ora, Melodie, and welcome to The Fold.
Kia ora. Nice to be here, actually. Yes.
I've been wanting to interview you for a long time. Have known you for a while, but particularly because 2020 it's been a crazy year for so many reasons, but it feels like professional sports, because of the nature of it, has been one of the most impacted industries. And 2020 is your first full year in charge of sports and events for TVNZ. Do you want to just sort of run through how it's been for you?
Yeah, look, it's been hard. It's been tough. There's been so much uncertainty. You know, I think from a TVNZ perspective, we were lucky because we had the sports rights coming up, which were cricket and America's Cup. And they were quite a way out from March when the first lockdown occurred. However, we had to stop all work, all production on those events, just put them in the warming drawer. And of course, we have the Olympics where Sky's partners with that, and that got pushed out for another year. So it's really uncertain. And I think the sports television and media industry as a whole really rocked. There are a lot of redundancies. A lot of my friends lost their jobs, lots of cost savings in the other companies as well, and friends who just haven't been able to work. It's been hard. But at TVNZ, the interesting thing is that we're not just about sports. We've got a heck of a lot of other things happening. And at the lockdown, just at the beginning, we got a call. We knew the Ministry of Education was looking to set up a children's education channel, and everybody else was super busy. So guess what? They rang me and my sports team and said, go and prop the ministry and come back and let us know what they say. And they ended up giving us a contract to provide children's programming over the lockdown, and we're still doing it for them. Isn't that great?
That's so amazing, because I mean, it just really speaks to the way that, I mean, all of New Zealand, but particularly, you know, of interest to me is the way the media was just incredibly adaptable to it. How did your team, which was sort of recruited to do these kind of big hero sporting events, respond to a completely different kind of assignment just being dropped in their laps?
Yeah, they look like possums in headlights first. I have one, Donald, I'm sure he won't mind me talking about him, but he is the biggest sports freak ever. He has got so much memorabilia, it's ridiculous, and he has worked in sports for 30-odd years. I don't think he'd ever watched a children's program, let alone having to get in there and help set up an entire channel. And at the start, it was hard. We had 10 days to set up an entire channel, and not only that, produce the lessons, film them, and get them in the system. So it was incredibly challenging, but we knew it was for a good reason, which was all of those kids who didn't have access, didn't have internet access, didn't have devices. This was about allowing them to continue learning. So by the end of it, guess what? We're all fantastic lovers of a lot of our amazing teachers who are also presenters, like Susie Cato. Karen O'Leary was one of our favourites, Karen's House. And who knew that there was such a thing as being a Karen? I found that out during the...
I feel like Karen should be exempted from the Karen status. She's a very specific individual.
Yeah.
And just kind of thinking about the broader sector, both within and without of New Zealand, how do you think the sort of pandemic, the lessons of it, both in terms of the sort of dangers that and issues that have been exposed by it, but also the kind of creativity of about what the core proposition for audiences and so on, like experiments like the NBA bubble, the way certain events have been able to get going and others have really struggled. What have you sort of learned through watching that, almost from a kind of sports media lens, almost more so than the actual events themselves?
Yeah, difficult question to answer that. I guess I'd look at it from a New Zealand perspective and what Aotearoa Super Rugby ended up being and bringing. So it moved from being probably your traditional sports broadcast, analysing sports, into a kind of a beacon of hope for a wider variety of Kiwis, right? So the audience numbers were absolutely outstanding. People were just happy, excited to celebrate New Zealand teams who are playing amazing rugby, and it proved that the product, Kiwi teams against Kiwi teams, is outstanding. So that was an interesting experiment to watch. And then we've seen the netball came back on as well, and unfortunately the story for them wasn't as positive, I think. I don't know why, because they still play great netball. It is an incredible sport, but, for some reason that didn't capture the imagination. Maybe they didn't have the same media following, coverage, whatever it was. The great point, though, was that they were allowed to, able to keep playing sport because of the fantastic way that COVID-19 was managed here. In terms of the rest of the world, particularly rugby, which is one I always keep an eye on, it's decimated, it's in trouble, and there are issues for many clubs and unions all around the world. So thank goodness New Zealand was able to manage the COVID-19 and allow some of our sports to keep playing.
Do you think that there is a sort of like a long-term positive effect in terms of forcing the sport to confront some of the issues which it had kind of just kept punting another year down the track?
Yeah, COVID-19 allows the opportunity to change your sport broadcast, I think, and to really think about what is going to hit your wider audience or earn the fans back, basically. Sport has always had the assumption that fans love sports. that's not necessarily the case anymore. I think we've done some recent research actually which showed that 13% of Kiwis are avid sports fans, 16% hate it, and everybody else in the middle can take it or leave it. Now that is confronting when you think about Kiwis, our culture, who we are, and I guess our national reverence of New Zealand teams and athletes. It means that sports bodies and sport broadcasters have to work a lot harder to make sure that what they put on TV or on OTT, whatever the platform is more compelling than it was before.
I mean, I think that kind of gets into the meat of it. For me, I've sort of been a frustrated kind of half fan, half observer of New Zealand rugby over the past 10, 15 years, during which it felt like both the delivery of the product, the distribution side and the presentation side had evolved quite rapidly and in a way that tried to go and meet the needs or the possibilities, the opportunities of this new era, and it just didn't feel like New Zealand rugby and rugby overall as a code particularly had been in motion, or even just like particularly interested in sort of playing and experimenting in that area, and it seemed to come back to almost some like fairly basic foundational assumptions of New Zealand rugby, which are just what you were talking about, in that they sort of seem to operate on the idea that, well, everyone loves rugby and we just put it on and they come. That's how this thing works. And they don't realise that they're now competing against UFC and the NBA, which have great streaming products, but also against like World of Warcraft. And they just aren't onboarding, fresh generations of young kids in the same way that they used to. Do you think that the new regime that's come into New Zealand rugby is sort of more cognizant of that? Because certainly you didn't get a strong sense from the sort of Steve Chu, Steve Hansen regime that they were overly concerned with that, and certainly the deal with Sky in some respects could look like it's a sort of everything's fine kind of a signal to the market.
Look, I hope so. I'm a rugby lover, so I'm optimistic around where they're heading. I think that particularly Bart Campbell, who's on the board now, is bringing a very audience-focused strategic direction for New Zealand rugby. I think it's a little unfair to say that, they didn't really think about, changing the broadcast, putting time and effort in, etc., because the truth is that there's so much rugby product that my time at Sky demonstrated this, that the production team is having to produce so much content around the rugby that it becomes like a sausage factory where you have to put in really strong templates and formats around how you produce a rugby production. Only then can you get out all of the content out the door. So what you see is a production which has a formula, and I'm sure because you're an avid rugby fan you would have noticed that over the years. But for All Black Test matches and Super Rugby, I would argue they do put a lot of extra elements in there. I think you see, is it the player cam? In the weekend they had one of those robot cameras that was whizzing up and down the field. They put a lot of time and effort into their graphics. So they do particular parts of the production super well. What I would say is that TVNZ has to have a completely different approach to a sport broadcast compared to your traditional subscriber-based model, which caters to sports fans. The reason we have to is because we've got a massive chunk of the audience, 50% basically over the last 4 months is who we're reaching, which is absolutely massive. So if I use America's Cup as an example, the way we look at this sport event is that it's not actually a sport event that we're bringing to the public. It's an event broadcast because we're on air from a minimum of 3 hours. No one is going to want to watch a bunch of blokes sitting around talking about sailing for 3 hours. So how do we achieve it so that when someone turns on the telly, there's something for everybody? And I guess we don't often use strategy or purpose around our broadcasts. So what we have is a really specific purpose that all of our team is going to align to, which is we just want to have a great time with Kiwis after a shit year. And so what that means is we want to have fun with them. We want to share with them the stories. We want to educate them because it's a complex sport, but we also want to party with them. And so our content reflects that. So the balance of our broadcast will be around about 40 to 45% event, people, fans, and 55% analysis, sport, because it's a great sport. It's something which Kiwis have never really seen before because they're like planes on the water. An example of the type of content we were taking somewhat of a risk on would be our Toyota integrated content. So, TVNZ earns money of advertising, whereas Sky or Spark is subscriber-based. So we have to be quite clever with how we bring in our sponsors because we really rely on them more than the other two companies. So with Toyota, they've sponsored an improv comedy that we are filming with TVNZ, which I won't say too much about yet, but it's probably it is the first time in New Zealand this has ever happened ahead of an international sport event where a team is involved with actors who are doing improv comedy. It's going to be amazing. From that, we bring one of the characters who's the Toyota ambassador into our profiles, and then they become part of the broadcast. And that person is a well-known semi-comedian who has a massive following in the youth audience. So that's how TVNZ is trying to change a sport broadcast because we believe that will hit audience segments that you might not reach if you just did an analysis of a sport.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of, when I was talking earlier about the lack of innovation, it was less around the kind of presentation of the game on the platform and more about the distribution and how to make it a big tent. Sky earns most of their money out of their satellite system, so you can understand why they would protect the box. But it's just about how long you protect it, right? Because it felt like, if you just look at the situation they're in now, they potentially protect it too long. But obviously there was the whole Commerce Commission thing there, which we said, you could do a whole hour on.
Yeah. Has John Follett ever said you're a broken record on that? Or have you asked Martin about this?
Oh, yeah.
He's new, he's fresh. So
I've asked them both about it. That's the thing that's interesting to me, and to hear you talk about is this idea that for sports to grow, it can't just say we're going to only speak to that avid fan group. We need to bring in that huge chunk of people in the middle who are going to be, basically persuadable, but not necessarily default into it. And I don't know whether, an improv comedy thing, it seems high risk, but if you pull it off, that's the kind of thing that might bring in a sort of a more casual fan. Just switching tack a little, is that kind of thinking more strategic, more sort of audience first rather than product first potentially? Is that the kind of thing that came out of your MBA, which you've done over the past few years? Yeah,
yes, absolutely, audience first. The MBA was an interesting exercise. I think that there are two main impacts from that have helped, where I am in the broadcast space. And the first is an appreciation of leadership and the different styles, and aspects of self-awareness, things that I really needed to work on. Can't just be the former rugby player coming in, swearing their head off and joking around and thinking that's okay in certain environments. I've learnt that now. Hello. Should have learnt that ages ago. So that personal development from it. But my MBA research project was, my passion project. I think we've spoken about it before. Why do corporates not typically sponsor women's sport when women are the most powerful consumers in the world? That relates to what we do with sponsorship and broadcast as well, because the lessons or the framework that came out of that was that we need to educate sponsors on who the athletes are, what the sport is, data around their audiences, their coaches, their people. And in television, I think that the fantastic job that Sky's actually done with the Black Ferns and also New Zealand Rugby and having them as curtain raisers to the All Blacks has actually seen a set of data which proves they have immense appeal as a television product. So that research project has been helpful in that. And the other, I guess one of the other findings was sponsorship contracts for sports teams should be looked at outside the box. So you don't just put a name on the jersey or on the side of the field. You've got to think of other ways to do that. And so you can take that and also put that against a broadcast sponsorship in terms of the integration. So typically sport broadcast doesn't have a lot of integration. I think cricket is pretty good with that. Not too many of the others. With TVNZ, that has to happen. We've got to do it. So how do we do it? We've got to do it in an editorial way, which adds to the whole sport broadcast. So that's thinking outside the box with that stuff too. So, that 3 years of study, amazing. They do call it the Marriage Breakup Association. I am still with my husband, unbelievably.
Well, congratulations on that front. It's quite funny you should sort of say that that you can't come in being the sort of sweary former Black Fern into every room, because that is why one of the. I mean, I personally feel like that's part of what makes you appealing as an on-air personality, but all, like that rawness and or the fact that you don't feel like you're being bullshitted by you is quite rare in the rugby realm. It feels like, whether it's true or not, the perception as a viewer, by the consumer of, and someone with some proximity to the All Blacks machine, as distinct from some of the other elements that New Zealand Rugby oversees, is that it really sands any kind of personality off All Blacks such that they might sell more Powerade. And that strikes me as almost like the opportunity for women's sporters to say, well, that's what they've done with their men's sport product, is they've just made them this super bland everything and kind of for no one product, so that, for very specific and obvious commercial reasons. But by allowing the personalities and just the hardships that women athletes have to go through that are very distinct from men to shine through, that will create a very different relationship with fans. I mean, do you want to talk a bit about the challenges and opportunities for women's sport? Because it seems to me there is like this global awakening happening, or certainly there was prior to COVID-19. Hopefully it's not threatened by it. But but it's a really complex problem, right? Like, some of it is sponsorship, a lot of it is media, some of it's presentation and scheduling. Where do you see the biggest opportunity kind of coming from, out of all of the different moving parts that are required to really help us sing?
Look, from a personal perspective, I think there's an amazing opportunity in the next 12 months to 2 years to create a framework or an example of how women's sport is commercialisable on a media platform. I think that TVNZ would be a great platform to do that on because of the reach, and it's free. So there are two advantages, I guess, in that we reach so many people and everyone can access it. So that's going to grow the potential of the sport for a start. And the other thing with potential with women's sport at the moment is that the mindset has changed, as you've mentioned. So it used to be, look, no one watches it. It's not really going to grow much. It's the All Blacks or the men's sport that we really care about. But people know now that the Black Ferns, the Silver Ferns, Fast Five if it comes back, women's tennis, athletics, women's golf, the list goes on, is an incredible product. And if I use the Black Ferns as an example, people who watch that game go, wow, this is actually different from men's rugby. It really is. And one of the ways it's different is you can see the patterns being played out on the field. Men's rugby is so quick that sometimes you don't see all the strategy or the chess pieces that are moved around. You certainly see that with the women's game. And the other thing about it is it's quite impactful seeing a woman smash another woman, and so that makes a great TV product. In terms of the media coverage, again, I think we're just, on the edge of media companies doing something meaningful. TVNZ's doing a really great job in its news strategy, and they're on a bit of a journey now too. And you might notice there's some incredible stories that they've been putting out lately on female athletes and actually the journey from most sports. So I think that, my from what I'm seeing there, just from the company I'm with, it's really positive. So yes, I think 1 to 2 years you're going to see a product on TV or on a platform which breaks a lot of the conception around women's sport that you can't commercialise it.
The Fold is brought to you by O Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa, with over 4,000 out-of-home advertising sites nationwide across both street furniture and retail centres. I'm super grateful to O Media for enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has the lowdown on everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market, the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. Join some of the superstars of the investment and business world as they share advice from their time in the US so you can make your mahi count in this massive market. The Investment Fix podcast, brought to you by Invest New Zealand. Tune in today.
I mean, and that's, I think probably a good opportunity to circle back to the sort of start of your career. Do you want to talk a bit about, like, I'm sure, like, both as an athlete and a journalist, there have been times when you've been the only Māori woman in the room and been told why, a particular, why things are the way they are, in a way that you've ultimately kind of, it feels like, if you look back, spent a lot of your career resisting or trying to effect a sort of positive change in that area. Do you want to talk about your first days as a journalist? I think you started in a press gallery, I found out recently.
Yeah, well, actually, my very first job was with Toby Robson at the Salient for Wellington University.
Really?
Yeah, he was my boss. He was a wonderful boss. I only lasted there for about 6 weeks because the pay was so bad. Then I went to the press gallery with Mana News, which was a Māori news organisation that was fantastic because we had a magazine and also radio, and it gave this Māori girl who was still playing rugby and very rough at the edges the opportunity to be in the press gallery and learn about our political system. I did not have one clue about how it worked. And so I was thrown in the deep end, trying to learn the different stages of policy and legislation as a 22-year-old, whatever I was ridiculously hard. But luckily it was the start of MMP, and we had a whole lot of other MPs in there that probably shouldn't have been in there, who also didn't have a clue. And so I guess I grew with a lot of those guys. The Type 5 from New Zealand First, the fabulous Māori females in there, Georgina Te Hiuhiu, Donna Awaturu Huata, they were Turiana as well. They were all very kind to me. And so unlike a lot of the other journalists, they actually, because I was Mana News, they'd give me an interview before anybody else. It was wonderful to be there because there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, which in today's world would be certainly in the newspaper or on Twitter or something. Mate, it was pretty full on.
What kind of stuff we're talking about?
Well, I won't go into detail, but I was in a party in the Beehive in Tohennety's office one night, and Jim Bolger said to me, "Why do you Marys complain about everything?" And then stumbled off. Yes, no, that was a goodie. But he was a good Prime Minister, because remember, under Jim Bolger and Doug, what's Doug's last name? Minister of Māori Affairs at the time. Sorry, mind blank.
Yeah, I'm the same too.
You know who it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they passed a lot of...
Graham.
Doug Graham. So they passed a lot of legislation around Treaty of Waitangi grievances, and two of them, Te Runanga o Ngaitahu and the Te Wainamu Pounamu Bill, were passed when I was there, and they were significant to me because I'm Kaitahu, and I came from a lot of the areas when we have traditional gathering rights. So that was so beautiful to be a part of, and also to see Sir Tipene O'Regan rip to bits some of the journalists in front of me. It was great. So a massive look. Everything is a learning experience. So you talk about being a Māori girl who was trying to affect change. Yes, but resilience is about learning, and so things might not go quite right at times, but you just have a positive outlook. My entry into Sky TV wasn't easy. I mean, you think that was 20 years ago, and there was this chick on TV doing rugby. That was, when I think back on it, I mean,
it's kind of amazing.
Gracious.
That almost feels like 10 years ahead of when you'd expect it to happen.
Yeah.
How did both the sort of staff and audiences respond to you? Because, it was kind of revolutionary at the time, and it must have been a lot to kind of go through, to just absorb and keep getting up.
The audience were not happy, that's for sure. And Radio Sport was the key conduit of expression at the time, so I was an avid listener of it. Actually, before I went to Sky, I was actually doing some shifts on Radio Sport, and I had to use the dump button a lot, let's put it that way.
Oh my God.
So I decided that wasn't really the platform for me because I was getting abused left, right and centre. But thank you, Murray Deaker. He gave me a good opportunity that was well appreciated. It was hard. It was really bloody hard. There was resistance from some people in the company, and certainly I found out many years later that, Fox Sport and Supersport South Africa were rubbishing New Zealand for having a female on there as well. But there were some incredible supportive people, and I'd say Rick Solizzo, he actually helped me with the opportunity. A guy called Brendan Butt, who's now at NEP, he was incredible, supportive. Andrea McVeigh, she trained me. She was there as well, and so I had a lovely network of support people. And then the crew, the crew are great, salty Kiwis. They don't get into all the backstabbing and stuff like that. They hear it, but they're there to be professional and fantastic people. So, you just get through it. And maybe I did drink a little bit too much booze to get through it as well. But
something.
Look, it was great. It was a great experience. And some of those... funny stories that, I tell my mates about over the years of working for Sky and World Rugby, because I did a lot of travelling for them as well, were amazing opportunities, experiences you'll never have unless it was, apart from that it was a rugby opportunity, like going to a World Sevens World Cup in Moscow. That was awesome, mate. Great. So beautiful. So beautiful. Did you know it gets up to like 38 degrees there in the summer?
I did not.
Yeah. And it's true, the women are beautiful, and some of the men are not. So, that was also interesting to watch.
Do you sort of now looking at a situation where, while it's by no means perfect, there are just so many more women of colour, Māori women, working within sports and just in the... in the industry in general, do you feel some sense of kind of pride at having made that journey, put up with all that stuff you had to carry and made it, blazed that trail somewhat? Yeah,
look, it's amazing. So I guess the thing is I was there, but there were other people there who wanted to change as well. And a lot of the time that is males who are in power. So when I mention your Brendans and your Ricks and also your Andrew Fifes and Kevin Cameron, they were really supportive of bringing in different people into the mix as well. So you never do it by yourself. And it's amazing to see the women. we set up that wonderful group about 3 years ago, and the other day I was reflecting on that. I'm super busy. Usually we set up 4 events during the year. We've only had 1 so far this year. But I had a think about, who out of our mentoring program has done well. And we've got about 5 or 6 full-time hires now at Sky Television from that mentoring program, which is amazing. We've got another one at TV3. We have a producer who's now been elevated to, a key decision-making position as well. We've consulted people and shared with them on contract negotiations many, many times. Dame Julie Christie is one of our members. She's the chairperson of the organising committee for the Women's Rugby World Cup. So all of these wonderful success stories, which are a legacy of not just me or supportive people in the past, but also all of these incredible women coming together, supporting each other and helping each other. So it's amazing. There is still a massive hole, and I think that's probably in the executive or key general management or CEO roles in sports and media. TVNZ's really good. Kate Slater is my boss, and she's incredibly astute, commercial, used to work for IMG as well, so was involved in 2011 Rugby World Cup. So that's a massive big tick that we've got somebody like that. No one really talks about Sophie Maloney at Sky TV. She's making one heck of a difference as well. She's head of commercial. So these 2 key amazing examples, but we need more of those.
I want to talk a little bit more about Wonderful Group in a bit because I'm so impressed with it. But I also want to zip back to another sort of element of your early career, which was XtraMSN, which when I was sort of researching yesterday, I saw that, those 7 letters and I realised I hadn't even thought about them for probably 15 years. I used to write for XtraMSN myself back in the day, some of my first music reviews. And it felt like, because this is before the Herald, before stuff, there was some of the first, I don't know if it was quite sort of blog style writing, but it was certainly writing with a freedom that you wouldn't get in print at the time. You were there for a reasonable while, right? Do you want to talk about that and about the culture of that place and how it's informed your career?
Yeah, so it started out as Xtra.co.nz, which was the internet provider. Quite a few people still have that email address. I always,
sure do.
Yeah, they're pretty old, those ones.
They are.
But it became a portal for content, which is where the XtraMSN link up happened as well. And we had these different channels, and so I was running the sport channel. There was music, entertainment, news, and it was amazing. They were disrupting the market. We had live chats with athletes, a lot of columns, lots of photo boards. It was a company which really encouraged you to try out things. So one of my ideas, I think 2002, America's Cup was obviously happening. They had a really crappy website. So I put together a prop, went down to TVNZ, and just like that, boom, because this happens in New Zealand, right? They go, okay, you can do our website. So we created and built their website, and we did a massive sponsorship with SAP, unheard of online at the time. And it was incredible, just, at 26 years old or something, to be able to just do that stuff with that company. Amazing time. I had lots of interesting people working for me, including Martin Crowe's dad as well, David Crowe, who wrote the cricket columns. And he actually invited me around to his house to set me up with Martin, and Martin turned up with a 21-year-old, so David was really gutted. I'm glad I didn't end up with Martin. He's awesome, he's a mate of mine, but in fact, my husband played with him, so it's probably good that I didn't. But it was great. It was a great time. We had a games room, all kinds of things. And then Telecom sort of brought us back under the umbrella again, and that's kind of when I got out, because it became a little bit more formulated around, where we were spending money and those kind of things, those boring things.
So tedious. And do you want, in terms of your, let's just return a bit to the Wonderful Group. Like, how did that come about, and what is the goal of it? Because it, I've had some very small involvement with it, but you just have to go along to the event to feel the sort of emotion, the possibility, and the sense of what of just what you're trying to accomplish and what just hasn't been before, and how important that mission is.
Yeah, it's really simple. More diverse, more empowered women in sport media. And so the aim is to not push people into positions before they're ready. It's actually about giving them skills, networking, mentoring to be able to be really ready and prepared when they get the opportunity. So it's been really, really good. And that started from a global mentoring program where I was set up at ESPN. And in America, these kinds of groups which try and accelerate different types of people into industry are quite common, whereas it wasn't in New Zealand, particularly around sport media. So when I came back, a bunch of us from all the different media companies said, yeah, we need this now. So it's really impacted in a very short time. I think the role of it is changing somewhat because we've got so many women who are now in positions where they wanted to be. So we're probably going to have to sit down and re-strategize what we do with it before the end of the year. So I'll look to do that. I'm looking for a sponsor who can give us some cash, and then we'll do more good work.
If you're listening, get in touch.
Yeah.
And, one of your alumni is Madeline Chapman, who just today scratched an episode that she directed of our sports documentary series, is nominated for Best Sports Program at the NZTV Awards. So
awesome.
She's
great.
It's working.
Yeah, she's got one heck of a mind, that girl.
She does.
Yeah.
One heck of a mind, one heck of a will. And so let's just to finish, talk about your move from Sky to TVNZ, which you've been with Sky for a long, long time. What prompted it, and just describe the role, and then what those first days, because obviously something hugely significant just landed in your lap basically the moment you got there.
Look, it was I guess you have time spans in your career, and I was so passionate about being a sport broadcaster and being a woman in rugby broadcasting. Yet after sort of 12 years, the travel, being away from my family, the role didn't probably challenge me or fulfill me like it used to. And I sort of looked around me and thought, look, how else can I impact this? Me being a commentator or a presenter isn't a position where you can influence the industry. So that's why I did the MBA, and I was chatting to John Follett in the cafe about it. He had so many great qualities. I know your criticism around the platform thing with Sky, but
John's an amazing person.
He really was.
Truly is.
Yeah, and he backed people. So he said, well, I've got a job, but, you have to interview for it. It's head of corporate comms. So Chris Major was the overall head of external, and so she interviewed me, and I came into the office to work for her and alongside John and Rick Last, who was the director of sport. And that was a wonderful learning experience. Great learning experience. Got to really see the workings and machinations of the company and the strategy. But the problem is that my heart is still in sports, and so head of corporate comms wasn't right for me. And so I came home one day and said to Marcus, and it was after one of those, career courses at the end of the MBA that did this, and I just said, I'm quitting. He went white, just about fainted, because that means he was going to have to pay all the bills. And I took a lovely 4 or 5 months off, lost loads of weight. He got a bit more attention. It was great. And it was just by chance that TVNZ was looking for a general manager of sports and events. And Kate Slater, I personally believe, is someone who is looking around her workforce and is genuinely looking for people who are different, who are going to add to the full mix. And so while I guess I knew I had all the skill set, working on OBs, production, blah, blah, but I hadn't held a general management role, it was probably slightly outside the box to fix me. I know that there was some very experienced people up against me. But she gave me the opportunity. And so that's that leadership thing I'm talking about. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And it's been amazing. TVNZ's a great company. They've got a very strong culture, very strong executive, good people, and they're back in the world of sport that matters to Kiwis, so big events, Tier 1 events, or sports that is slightly more entertaining, like the Black Clash, or sports that we are doing for another reason, which is like the Paralympics, because that's really important for New Zealand, and it's great to be, working for them on those kind of products.
Did you? I'm just trying to think about the timing, but had the extent of TVNZ's recommitment to sports become visible at that time, or has that sort of come out of the work and thinking you've done?
No. They were already back in the game with the Commonwealth Games, and Kate had already signed up, or Kate had signed up the Rugby World Cup deal alongside Spark, which was a massive game changer.
It's quite a relaxing thing to have sort of 6 months out from your start date.
Well, yeah, but Dennis Harvey was also there, who's an experienced executive producer, so a really beautiful, safe pair of hands. But yeah, big events. It was fantastic to be involved in the Rugby World Cup, and my role there was actually I was commentating for World Rugby, doing 20 hours a week for TVNZ over there, and key to that was to see the IBC set up and how we were handling that side of it. So, yeah, it was great. It's good fun. I've got the best job in the world.
And I think you might, certainly for you. Another element of it, though, and you mentioned just before we started recording, was that you've actually just joined the board of the Rugby World Cup Limited globally.
Yes.
How did that come about, and what are you most excited about doing with that from a sort of a sports media perspective? Because that's the cash cow of World Rugby, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. It oversees all of the Rugby World Cups. It's massive. It came about by, I guess, my relationships over the years with many people, not the older administrators or leaders in rugby, more my generation of rugby players, and I'm talking about men. And the fact that I've travelled around the world so often, I've developed some strong relationships. They were looking for, it's a player's perspective, right? It's a player's voice. So they were looking for somebody who would genuinely represent the players. So that person's probably shouldn't be affiliated to a union, and they need to be neutral. And to be honest, there's not a lot of options out there. So look, who did they get? But no, they looked at my CV. This is a big appointment. Like, the CEO had to tick it off. So they looked at my CV and said, yes, she can add value. And myself and Brian O'Driscoll are the Players Association's reps on that board. It's big. Women's Rugby World Cup has been brought under the umbrella. It used to be under, I think, the commercial side. This shows a real commitment to actually making that an event which makes money, one that they do have to invest in, but actually makes money back for them. So that's, of course, my passion. But there are other big pieces in the picture in terms of, the hosting, how do we make that fair, and just contributing from a player's perspective, which is around wellbeing and making sure World Cups have got the right criteria which look after the players. So it's massive. And I get to sit next to Brian O'Driscoll. I just think that's cool in itself.
Yeah, he gets to sit next to you, really, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much for your time, Mel. Really, really fascinating to hear about, a completely unparalleled career in New Zealand sports media. And, good luck with everything that comes next.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at oOh!media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to oOh!media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spin-off Podcast Network.